Happy Wednesday, everyone. It's your boy Esoteric back at it again with some more Logicast, the Logical Gamers podcast. We're two-man in it for this current session. I'm here with Gunna Eos, and
Hello, hello.
today we're going to be discussing the opposite of the high that was the Nintendo Switch 2 last week. We're going to be discussing this article from Kotaku titled "My Excitement for the Switch 2 is Dying by a Thousand Cuts." Now, this is a pretty interesting article because I was hearing a lot of feedback from a few people pertaining to the Switch 2 and their highly anticipation for it. And we also gave our thoughts last week pertaining to the Switch 2. A couple of days after the Nintendo Direct was announced during that recording of that video. Sorry. And we had a mixed bag of feelings. We definitely spoke about the Switch 2 being a formidable system. However, there were some instances where some of us were happy with the system, but not with some of the practices that the company is taking with the games, and also whether or not it would be fiscally feasible for us to obtain it at day one. So we had a big conversation about that. Check out last week's topic if you want to learn more about what we said and get into further details. But yeah, I'm going to read this article to you guys, and we're going to pretty much see what this person who wrote the article, who goes by the name of Claire Jackson, what is their issue with the Switch 2, and what are their feelings pertaining to it and whatnot. Okay, so with that being said, my excitement for the Switch 2 is dying by a thousand cuts. The Switch 2 impresses in so many ways, but there's enough worry here for me to hold off on buying one in the near future. Alright. Let me get this out the way first. I'm not a Nintendo girly. A couple of decades ago, my parents gave me a choice between N64 or PlayStation for my birthday, and I chose the team with the badass Bandicoot and didn't regret it. It wouldn't be until 2019 that I'd pick up a Switch, and still, it wasn't until summer of last year, 2024, that I'd put serious miles on it. The slim form factor and enormous game catalog made it a perfect companion for New York City. Oh, represent New York City subway trips, picnics, picnic hangs with friends, and late night gaming in bed with a machine that didn't tire my arms the way the heaviest Steam Deck does. That is a good point. It was the platform on which I enjoyed the hell out of a recent replay of Final Fantasy VII, and I was all in for the Switch 2 as I dreamed for a better screen, more processing power, and cool new modes like the long rumored and now confirmed mouse mode. That is a nice implementation. It's gonna work really well with Civilization. So for those of you
True.
who are picking
Yeah.
that up, it's gonna be good. Um, but y'all, while I had a good time watching the Switch 2's big reveal yesterday, I'm finding myself a little reluctant to make room for a $450 purchase right now, with a prospect of paying $80 for some games moving forward. When we're talking about this kind of money, I think it's healthy to be skeptical of what we're being sold. Right, and now the article goes into some subtopics and a breakdown of the reason as to why she is exhibiting this reluctance. It should have an OLED screen, which I absolutely agree with, especially if you're charging for last gen upgrades. A solid LCD screen does exist. I've seen it on the ROG Ally X. And maybe once I see a Switch 2 in action, I'll shut up about this. But for the OG Switch to have gotten an OLED upgrade just for its successor to regress in that area just rubs me the wrong way, especially as upgrades to last gen games like Breath of the Wild are going to cost me extra.
Mm.
Improvements to the two stunning Zelda titles and Metroid Dread from the OG Switch are top of mind for me personally. I held off on going too deep into those games because I wanted to see them running with better frame rates and resolution on Switch 2. Sure, that's a limitation I chose to impose, but with an LCD screen and an extra upgrade charge for Zelda, I'm wondering if I'm better off waiting for a possible OLED upgrade to the Switch 2 before I invest. And speaking of investing, with some games priced at $80 to $90, you have some nerve selling these game key cards. I absolutely, unequivocally agree with this.
Yeah. Yep.
If you haven't heard, some Switch 2's physical games won't actually be physical. Yet they'll require you to insert a piece of plastic into your machine that tells a server somewhere else that you have permission to run the game. This is just gross and wasteful. I am not opposed to digital only games. Valve has proven that it can work so long as the company is willing to put the effort into maintaining a healthy digital storefront. No, not every game on Switch 2 will necessarily cost the higher $80 entry price, and not every game will use a game keycard, but the very fact that this price and distribution method is in play makes me a little sick. When you're establishing a standard of damn near $100 a game for a $450 machine, this experience is now too much of an investment for access to be this ephemeral process of inserting a piece of plastic that's destined for a landfill the second those servers are gone. I don't mind spending a lot of money for quality stuff, especially for hobbies I genuinely enjoy. And yes, contrary to what my coworkers think, I do like video games mostly. But what I am getting for these higher price games, some of which may require me to hang onto silly plastic keys. Cyberpunk 2077 and Borderlands 4 are cool, but this is just gonna look like DLSS slop. The Switch 2 packs a 1080p screen that runs at 120 Hz. That might drain the battery more than it should, but I'm really excited about the higher frame rate, almost enough to make me overlook the LCD tech, but not quite. It's also going to have contemporary graphics powerhouses like Cyberpunk 2077 and Final Fantasy VII Remake, along with modern AAA games like Borderlands 4, and the excitement over that is quickly diminished when I start thinking about the fact that the console will support DLSS. Okay, so she gets into detail a little bit as to what DLSS is. For the uninitiated, DLSS is some pretty neat technology that uses AI to lessen the burden on your machine to render games at higher resolutions, and I hate it. I've spoken with some folks who don't seem to mind it. In fact, they seem to love it. But to my eyes, DLSS not only seems to serve as an excuse for a game not to be well optimized, it also looks blurry as hell. Part of me wonders how much of this is real and how much of this is in my head. Like folks who claim they can't listen to MP3s or streaming audio because it sounds too compressed. Hi, I'm one of those, and yes, I have a library of FLAC files for my music. There's some weird psychology at play with our relationship with perceived quality. But every time I turn on DLSS on a game on PC, I find I'm a little less queasy, can see things more clearly, and in general have a better experience. And if this machine is also going to boast being able to run ray tracing, I have to have a full desktop PC for that kind of thing and don't need a Switch 2 to try and compete with that when it might not work out well for quality and battery life. If experience on a Steam Deck is anything to go by, the industry seems to be running into a bit of a problem with overpromising performance on portable hardware. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is one of the bigger recent sinners here. Sure, it runs on the hardware, but it ain't great. It might sound really impressive to reveal that a graphically sophisticated game will run on new hardware, but how do we define run, especially when you're charging $80 on a $450 machine? Still, at least I can fall back on a healthy, near endless supply of original Switch titles to enjoy on upgraded hardware, right? I worry for the future of backwards compatibility. Despite having an identical port for game cartridges on the as the original Switch, the Switch 2 won't be universally backwards compatible. You might think, oh, that's fine. The hits will surely play, right? Right now, that prospect is, well, it's tricky enough to raise an eyebrow. Currently, there are more than 120 original Switch games that will run into issues running on Switch 2. And these aren't random no name titles. Games like Doom Eternal and Fortnite will have issues, it seems. Nintendo says it's tested a ton of games, reporting that many original Switch titles will run, but it's a bit of a shame that we're gonna have to double check for each game. It makes carrying over a healthy library of one's own games or diving into some last gen classics and hidden gems on fresh hardware not as seamless as it should be. I'm getting flashbacks to the Xbox 360's backwards compatibility, and I don't like that. Okay. And she's finalizing with the Switch 2 will mostly certainly sell incredibly well. People will have a blast on new games like Donkey Kong Bonanza, Mouse Mode with Metroid Prime 4, might really be something special. But the price of games, graphically intensive games that seem like too much for the hardware to handle, and the lack of a damn OLED screen for this price category, it's enough to make me hesitate before throwing money at the screen. So she said quite a lot in this article.
That she did.
There's absolutely a lot to unpack here. Uh, what are your thoughts, Gunner, on this article?
Um, well, I mean, she has a point, realistically, with her kind of trepidation about the new console. It's kind of the reason why I won't be buying the console at launch, or more than likely won't be buying the console at launch personally. So kind of quickly run down her kind of bullet point this a little bit. So her first opening is an OLED screen. Now, I used to play for those of us that for listening that don't remember, there used to be a handheld console called the PlayStation Vita. The PlayStation Vita that released with an OLED screen. And for the PlayStation Vita, it actually helped a lot. Like the OLED screen, the images are more vibrant, the colors are more, they pop more, so it does matter. And with the Vita being a strictly handheld console, that mattered more. And when over the course of the Vita's life, Sony ended up kind of going for the cheaper budget down the line with subsequent Vita models, which was an LCD, which Nintendo seems to be starting with the Switch 2.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think the OLED versus LCD debate it's a real thing, right? It matters to some people, but it also doesn't matter to other people. So for me, I used to think that I would always be taking my Switch with me wherever I go because I used to do it with the 3DS. Then I kind of like had the Switch, and the Switch is a far cry from the 3DS in terms of compatibility. 3DS, I can slip it to a pocket. I can slip it to a coat pocket, a jacket pocket, or a bag. The Switch you could do, but you're not putting your Switch in your pocket.
Yeah.
Not happening. And I don't know what New York City she'd be living in, but me personally, I don't know about sitting on the fucking 4 train going underground with a Switch, and headphones in my ears playing that shit on the train. You can do it. Props to you. That's not the world I live in. So I don't know about. So for basically TLDR, my Switch is not very portable. Now I still use its portability. I want to lay in bed. I want to grind some levels in Unicorn Overlord or maybe the Xenoblade.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
do that, in bed, and that's when I'll use the portable. So the amount of times I'm using it portable, it's not really as much as I thought I would be using it, quite frankly. So for me, I don't really mind if it's an LCD screen again, because half the time I'm gonna have it docked. If I'm playing it, I'm playing it docked. So I can understand where that would be a deal breaker for someone, and I get it. I'm not gonna knock it, but for me personally, I can either or. Like, I prefer the OLED if we just I agree if they're charging us over $400 for this console, I think OLED should just be standard. Because if they do an OLED upgrade later on, that's just gonna smack people in the face who were early adopters and got the LCD one.
Yeah.
If anybody's willing to do it, it's Nintendo, but should we have to? Um So her next point about the $80 to $90 games, I said this in our last topic a little bit when we were talking about the actual Switch 2 Direct. I am not a big fan of Nintendo kind of introducing $80 price tags to their games, because it's not even so much for strictly Nintendo games. It is the precedent that this is going to set. The fact that Nintendo was the first one to do it is now going to open the door for every other company that's been itching to raise their game prices for years now.
Yeah.
So do not be surprised if, because of Nintendo, other games in the AAA space, your Capcom, Square Enix, EA, Activision, Warner Bros., whatever, all of those guys, do not be surprised if you start seeing $80 games for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox and PC with the, now that Nintendo did it. And if you're a GTA guy, if Rockstar wasn't already thinking about doing it, they have kind of carte blanche to do it now because Nintendo did it, so we could probably get away with charging $100. I don't know. This is just me looking into my crystal ball. Might not happen, but because Nintendo has $80, an $80 game in Mario Kart World, whether it's a justifiable price compared to the game you get or not, the point is this is now set a precedent, and that's what I don't like. If it's a quality title, I don't mind paying $80 because one can make an argument that you end up paying that and more with subsequent DLCs and expansions and whatnot. And if you're a Mario Kart player, you've probably paid well over $100+ with how many track expansions that game has had. So if it's a quality title, I think people will pay for it. But we live in a world where not every video game is a quality title, and they still try to charge us premium prices for it. So it's only going to get worse now. Um, the cyberpunk thing that she complains about, to me, it's kind of like, to me, it's options. So if you're a player who only has a Switch and soon a Switch 2, and they don't play on PC, they don't play on consoles, a game like Cyberpunk was already denied to you. So
Yeah.
I think the fact that these people have this option now, if you're expecting it to perform like ultra settings on a PC, I think your expectations are a little bit unfounded. But if this runs well and looks decent, which from everything I'm seeing, she doesn't mention in the article, but it's going to kind of run like it runs on a Steam Deck. So if you're comfortable with it looking like it looks on a Steam Deck, the Switch will be fine for you because
Yeah.
you just want to play Cyberpunk. It's not really you. If you're being reasonable, you understand that I know my Cyberpunk isn't going to look like someone else's Cyberpunk with the latest PC rig running the game on ultra setting. So if you set your expectations a little bit in the realm of reality, this could be good for you. Same with Elden Ring. Now, if you're a Switch owner, you can play Elden Ring, a phenomenal game
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah.
So, like, I can understand if it's just like, why play Cyberpunk on a fucking 2 when I can play it on a PlayStation 5 and run it better? It's like, yeah, sure, but maybe that person doesn't have a PlayStation, doesn't want it for whatever reasons, but they want the Switch 2. Now they have Cyberpunk. You know, uh, when the Switch came out and The Witcher 3 was one of the early titles for it, I heard the same thing. I just play Witcher 3 on my PlayStation 4. It's like, well, maybe I want to play it on the Switch. And I understand that it's not going to be the same looking game, but as long as it runs well and plays well, I think there'll be people who overlook it. So more choices isn't a bad thing in
Yeah.
my. And her last point, this I also agree with. I mentioned it in our Switch to presentation video. I do not like this game key thing that's going on, and I really didn't think it would come from Nintendo of all people. I thought Sony would pull a stunt like this, but the fact that it's Nintendo doing it, the people that I thought were kind of like the last bastions of true physical ownership when it comes to your games, is surprising and kind of disheartening, if I'm going to be real. So with these game keys, she brings up a very good point. Like, how long? Like, what kind of guarantee or assurance do we have that these servers that are going to check and allow us to download are licensed to play this game? How long are they going to be around? Like, we have no determining factor of that. So take a game that I was looking forward to. It's a remake, sure, or a remaster, I should say.
Same.
The yeah, there you go. Like the Bravely Default, they're gonna remaster that game, and that's gonna launch with the Switch 2. That is confirmed to be one of those game key games. So when I go to the store and pay, who knows, 60, 70, maybe $80 to get a remake, or not even a remake, a remaster of a 3DS game, I will not own that Switch 2 game. I will own a key to unlock the digital version of that game and play it. What happens if 6 years from now, 7 years from now, Square Enix decides, you know what? I don't want to host these servers anymore. Now that literally is just a hunk of plastic. It's worthless. What happens if there's a day that comes where either my internet or the Nintendo network is having issues and I can't connect to the internet
Yeah.
and I want to play Bravely Default? Can I not do that anymore because there is no internet check anymore? This is what, we see this happen all the time. There was a recent PlayStation outage that lasted 24 hours and people could not play their games digitally. You know what I could do? I could play my games physically because it was on the disc.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like these game keys, I'm not a fan of them. I definitely do not see this being a one-off thing. And if it's cheaper, you can bet your ass Nintendo and other third-party developers are gonna opt for it because they always want to save money. And they don't give a shit about you or your happiness. So if it saves them $6 per cartridge to make it a game key, as opposed to putting it all on the cartridge, you bet your ass they're gonna take that $6 saving. So I'm not a fan of that. That realistically, right there and then, not even so much the pricing, the whole game key thing, personally killed my hype for the console. And it went from I'll probably pick this up day one to I'm just gonna let it sit for a bit and wait. And the compatibility that she's talking about with 120 Switch games, some being prominent titles like Doom Eternal and Fortnite, yeah, that's a problem too. Now, I'd like to think that Nintendo will address those situations and eventually get them compatible. And
Hmm.
I'm going to play devil's advocate and find the silver lining. Out of the sheer number of Switch games that exist, the fact that only 120 have issues is still pretty low. There are thousands of Switch games. So the fact that there's only 120 that are having various problems, it could be worse. It could be half the Switch library or like 80% of it.
Yeah.
So, but it is a valid point, and I do want to acknowledge that. And again, it kind of it kills my personal hype for this system. So me personally, I'm gonna probably wait on the console. So that was my points. I just ran through it. I know I blabbed a lot. So if you have any like rebuttals or just want to piggyback off of anything I said, esoteric, just I'll turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, in regards to like Nintendo wanting to save money, I think we should give Nintendo a tad bit more grace because out of all the companies, Nintendo has always been the one that tries to be fiscally reasonable when it comes to their consumers' pockets. I mean, yes, there has been instances where they released consoles that were egregious in terms of pricing. I believe I mentioned it in the last conversation we had pertaining to the Switch 2 regarding the 3DS, the very first one that came out. But I think overall they always have tried to be reasonable, and by doing that they kind of like shot themselves in the foot in a sense of like not choosing the best hardware at the time. Trying to be a little more reasonable with their components just to be able to uh, distribute the consoles at a reasonable price. So I think we should give them a little bit more grace, especially considering now that they're pushing themselves to be up to date. And this is what a lot of consumers have been asking for. They're like, oh, well, it doesn't run like the PlayStation. Why are we so far behind? The console has been around for 10 years and we haven't gotten an upgrade. Nintendo finally gave it to them, but, when you ask for something, there's going to be a clause when it comes to technology. It's like, oh, you want a faster processor? Well, it's gonna cost this much. You want to beef up your console to play 4K? Well, not your console, but your rig to play 4K and things like that. With no stutter, you're gonna have to like pay for all these different things. Now, in regards to the functionality of the console, like if the games aren't delivering, because we had this conversation last week briefly about that. If the games aren't running as efficiently as it should, given the hardware that the Switch 2 is providing, then I think people have the right to make a fuss about it. Because it's like, why do you have all these components in the game? I mean, in the console, but it's running like the original Switch. If that's the case, then you could have
Right.
just made those games on the Switch, right? So that's pretty much the only rebuttal that I had pertaining to that in terms of like giving them a little bit more grace. Um, as for the article, I feel like 50% of it, she made some very bad, very valid points, and then I think the other 50%, she was kind of nitpicking, which is fine. As a consumer, you can absolutely nitpick about what you want in a console, what you don't want, or in any item that you want to purchase. It's your given right. But what I like to do is try to look at things objectively and think about how I, the consumer, will utilize a device. So I wrote down some things that you were speaking on, Gunnar, and the first one was the whole issue pertaining to the screen, right? With it being LCD. Now, I do absolutely agree, given the price point and given that the Switch had a successor, which was the OLED, and it was cheaper than what the Switch 2 is price point at this time. I feel like the Switch 2 should have incorporated an OLED screen, right? Now, the thing is, this is only going to affect those dependent upon how you play, right? As you stated, you're more of a dock guy. For me, I'm a dock guy as well because, like, with me working from home, with me not really traveling a lot, and when I do travel, I'm driving, so it's not like I could play the Switch and
Yeah,
drive
right.
at the same time, unless I'm parked up waiting for someone. I'm not really going to get a lot of utilization within that screen. In her case, it seems like she travels around a lot, so chances are that would be a big issue for her because if your experience is predominantly handheld mode, then I can definitely understand why you're kind of disappointed in the LCD screen as opposed to the OLED screen. Because I bought the original Steam Deck and then I bought the OLED, and it's a stark difference. It's a vast difference. Like the colors are more fluid. They pop up. They look. It looks phenomenal. Um, it's not really much of a deal breaker for me to have the LCD screen, but I understand with the price point, I get that, and how she utilized it, I absolutely get that. So another thing that was mentioned about the games being 80 to $90. Um, it's bittersweet. It's absolutely bittersweet. The bitter portion is, in no way, shape, or form do I ever want to pay that amount for a game. Hell, I don't even want to pay $70 for a game.
Yeah.
Like I want to go back to those days where Game Boy games was like $40 and like regular games was pushing 49 to like 59.99. Like I wanted it to,
Yeah, I
you
miss the
know,
3DS days.
yeah,
$40 games.
I miss it so
Mhm.
much. Fit and then 59.99. I think during the tax time it was 65.31 in New York. Um, that's was the price point. It was much more tolerable. But when it comes to Switch games, primarily first party games from Nintendo, I think that they can absolutely request that because given the experience that I have with Switch games or with Nintendo games, you get a lot of longevity with them. Like them asking for Mario Kart to be $80, I can understand that. The game looks phenomenal. The game, you know, they added a lot of features to the game, and what I do know is that Mario Kart 8 was being played for 10 years. First, it was on the Wii U. I think actually it was on. No, I think 7 was on the Wii, and then 8 was on the Wii
That
U,
yeah, yeah.
and
8 was on Wii U. Yeah,
yeah, and then they migrated it over to the first Switch, and then from there they added DLC like years later. So
yeah.
if they continue that trend, I think that warrants the $80. Now, more adding more to the bitter part is that other companies feel as though this is a opportunity for the tides raising all ships, because if Nintendo can do it, then I can do it, as you stated.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, if you want us to pay $80, then you better come correct with the quality of games that you're providing to us. You know, you can't come to us with, like, let's say if Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out and they're requesting $100, you can't give me an Assassin's Creed game for $100 and it's riddled with bugs. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm currently enjoying Shadows, but what's taken away from the immersion are the bugs and whatnot. So if the price point was a lot higher than what it should have been or what it is now, which was $70, I got the collector's edition, so I like the statue and whatnot, so I paid a little bit more. But it's originally priced at $70, so if you're going to charge $100, you better come correct. I mean, I already spent too much for a $70 game for Assassin's Creed Shadow, given the circumstances that it has. Um, so yeah, what's going on? We got a guest in the building. What's going on, Kong? Kong.
Slight flub there, but it's all
Yeah,
right.
no, yeah, no worries. Yeah, he's probably thought that we were done with the recording. But but yeah, if you're the more money that you're asking for is the more stuff that you need to provide to us. You can't give us the cookie cutter things that you've been giving us. And I believe Nintendo first party games don't really do that. In a sense, like they usually go above and beyond with the quality of games that they're providing. Whether you're a original Zelda fan or a Breath of the Wild New Age Zelda fan, you can say definitively that they provided a quality game, very extensive, and it lasted hours, depending upon like how much things you wanted to do. Same thing with Mario Kart, same thing with Smash Brothers. Um, you know, all the other like games that they provide. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, and that's the sweet side of things with the quality of games that they're providing. Now, to add more to the bitter portion is the fact that first party Nintendo games don't go down in price. Like, honestly, they really don't. The same amount that you're getting from their digital store is the same amount that you're going to get at a GameStop, at a Best Buy, and so on. Um, it's not like Sony or Microsoft where it's like they're selling their games for the actual retail price, the initial retail price that they released it at in the digital store. But if you go to GameStop, you're getting it for like 30, 40, about $40 cheaper. That's not the case with Nintendo. Nintendo upholds its integrity when it comes to pricing. Um, Here's where I think in the article that she's kind of nitpicking. Cyberpunk being playable on the Switch 2 or whatever, and not getting the full integrity experience, resolution experience that you're looking for. Honestly speaking, if you are going to play a game like Cyberpunk, if you're going to play a game like Elden Ring, if you are someone who is, for lack of a better term, a graphical snob, then Nintendo products are really not for you. They're really not, honestly speaking. That money that you would spend on a Switch 2, invest in a PS5, or a Series X, honestly speaking, because you're going to get the best quality experience, the best console quality experience on those two consoles. If you're looking for it
Yeah.
on a Nintendo Switch, that's not the place to go. I'm sorry, it's just not. Honestly, I think these games are for people who don't really care about the graphical integrity, but just want the experience of playing that game because they missed out on opportunities like being on the PS5. Because it's like, let's say there's an example of, well, I like the PS5, but I travel a lot for work. So I'm not going to buy a PS5 because it's a waste of an investment. So I'm going to get a Switch 2 or an original Switch because of the familiarity of the first party titles and because it's portable. And it's a good console to have despite its lackadaisical hardware. It's a good console to have. It makes they've made a plethora of good games that have substantial gameplay, you know? Um, so that was one of the things that I think that she was kind of like nitpicking at, like games and whatnot. Um, and as you stated already, you already touched on Gunner, the backwards compatibility. Um, you know, I am definitely an advocate for backwards compatibility, but let's be honest, new consoles focal point is supposed to be for the new games. You know what I'm saying? Like the the Nintendo the Super Nintendo did not have any backwards compatibility for the NES. You know, the GameCube did not have backwards compatibility for the Super Nintendo or the 64. Like all of these things, all of these consoles had their own proprietary games. It wasn't until recently, like maybe in the early 2000s or whatnot, maybe a little bit later, where they started introducing the backwards compatibility. I think I forgot the year that the PS2 came out or whatnot, and that's when that was the rise of backwards compatibility. But honestly speaking, although I would appreciate it, that's not what these systems are intended for. They're intended for you to have experience with the new games that are being provided. So when they do incorporate backwards compatibility, I am very happy about that and appreciative of that. And if there are 100 and some odd games that are not compatible, that's still a win because the library of the Switch, as you already stated, Gunner, is massive.
Mm.
You know, the percentage of those 120 to the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games that they provide you, it's probably like maybe 5 to 10%, give or take, you know. And knowing Nintendo, they're probably gonna work towards making that available to us, you know, because again, I'm giving Nintendo grace. They're really good when it comes to being financially understanding to some degree. Uh, but going back to the other side of things, where she really hit the nail on the head, the game keys, they're absolutely nonsense. They played around with it on the Switch because there were certain games that they did have, like
That's
Darksiders
true.
2.
Yeah.
They also had Resident Evil. They had quite a few games where they gave you the cartridge of one game, and then they gave you the download the DLC for the remaining games. And I don't like that. I really don't. I'm not a fan of digital content. I mean, if you guys who have watched the podcast religiously, you guys already know that we are advocates of physical media. So just having a cartridge that has no value, you guys might as well just have a digital storefront. You know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, my question to that is it Nintendo that's implementing this? Like, is this a Nintendo Switch 2 decision, or is this at the discretion of the developers or the companies that are making the third party games? Because I don't think I saw any first party games that were Game Key accessible. Can you confirm that,
Um.
Gunna, or no?
So I don't have it right in front of me, but I think a lot of the first party games are physical. Like the game is on the cartridge. I know for a fact Cyberpunk is on the cartridge. It's not a game key.
Okay.
Um. So, but the problem with the whole game key thing, like I get you. This isn't. brand new to the Switch because the Switch has they have games like this.
Mm-hmm.
So Kingdom Hearts 3, for example, is technically quote unquote on the Switch, but what it is, it's one of those cloud gaming. It's one of
Yeah.
those cloud games.
Yeah.
So you buy a code which allows you to access Kingdom Hearts, but it needs the internet to run it because Kingdom Hearts is like a PlayStation 4 game, and the Switch cannot run Kingdom Hearts
Yeah.
natively with its own hardware.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of other games that they'll open up and like they'll give you a code to download the game.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't new. The problem with this is that at least even right now with the titles that we know about for the Switch 2, there's a big inconsistency with what's a game key and what's not. Because again,
Okay.
I go back to Bravely Default. Bravely Default is a 3DS game.
Yeah.
Sure, there are enhancements, but from what I've seen in the trailer, it looks to be fundamentally the same game.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't like Xenoblade Chronicles to Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive, where they change the art style, they up the graphics, where you can make an argument that one is a more intense game than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is literally a 3DS game with some modern enhancements and some kind of reworks to make the Street Pass features available on a system that obviously doesn't have Street Pass anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, there shouldn't be any real reason why that's a game key game. Now, I don't know if this is Nintendo that did it. I would, in this specific instance, I would put the blame more on Square Enix.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to feel that like these game keys are cheaper. They have to be cheaper in some capacity, which is why Square Enix did this. They wanted to take the cheaper option. Nintendo gave them a cheap option with the game keys, so Square Enix took that option.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm right, that means that we don't know. There could be a multitude of games that come out, whether they're remakes, remasters, or brand new games that are game key only because it is cheaper for the developer overall. We might see remakes to other Nintendo games that are potentially game key games because, it's just cheaper. So, like, my biggest problem with it is it's it's gonna get abused. I feel like it's gonna get abused, especially by these third-party developers and maybe potentially even Nintendo themselves. Like if it's cheaper, these companies always want to get the cheapest option.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why I'm not a fan of it, man.
Oh
I
no
think
no.
it's
I'm.
gonna get abused, and there goes physical media, dog. Like that, like Nintendo in one fell swoop, they just like they put physical media, physical video games into intensive care, and I don't know if it's gonna come out alive.
Yeah, I mean, I get you 100%. Like, I'm in no way, shape, or form an advocate for it. I was just trying to determine who is to blame for these keys, right? Because if Nintendo first party games don't have that, then we know that Nintendo games, because honestly speaking, Nintendo games, because their integrity of games are so solid, I'd want to keep those physically because once physical, unfortunately, I hate to say it, I can't believe this is coming out my mouth. When physical media dies, those games are going to skyrocket. Those physical copies of those games are going to skyrocket. So I was just trying to determine, well, is this a third party decision? Is there a correlation between the first party titles that were announced versus the third party? Like who's opting for the keys? That's what I wanted to know to kind of see if it's Nintendo that's doing it as well, if they're practicing it as well, because I think it's a little ridiculous considering the fact that they're setting a new tone for the price point. Um, and honestly, if I don't want to pay $70 for digital media, then why would I want to pay $80 for digital media? So, and I also feel like the so far at this juncture, the first party games are way more important than the third party. At least for me, for right now. So that's why I was asking that question. Like if we can eliminate keys entirely, I'd be ecstatic. Like I'd be super elated about that because I am a physical media enthusiast.
No, yeah, I get that. Same. And that's what killed my hype for it, if I'm gonna be completely honest.
No, I
Um,
understand that because you certainly do love playing remakes and remasters of games as well as and that would have been an absolute incentive because not only were you getting a game that's only dedicated to one console at this time, at this moment, you're now getting a game where it's like you're now getting an updated version of that game where you can play on the most latest console, which is better equipped. And well, not better equipped, but it's a it should be a better experience in terms of like the performance and whatnot. And you don't have to like squint at the little screen and stuff. So I absolutely get that. And then it's also an opportunity for them for whatever remakes and remasters that they do announce. It's an opportunity for us to pick those up, um, especially the games that we weren't able to get during the time where they initially released. Because I that's one of the main reasons why I appreciate remakes and remasters and stuff. So if they make it, if they make those service keys, it's going to be a problem. It's there's definitely going to be a reluctance on my end, um, because there's no way in hell I want to spend $80 for a digital game. There's no way, no way.
so I was doing some research while you were saying your point, and this is
Yeah.
according to PlayAsia,
Mhm.
their listing. So the games that are confirmed game key games
Mhm.
are Street Fighter 6, Shine Post, Be Your Idol, which I have no idea what that is, Elden Ring, Bravely Default, and Survival Kids. While the ones that are not game key, which means the game is on the cartridge,
Mhm.
Mario Kart World, Cyberpunk, Yakuza 0 Director's Cut, Super Mario Party Jamboree, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, Daemon X Machina, Hogwarts Legacy, Wild Hearts, which I thought Wild Hearts was dead. Fucking wild that it's on the Switch. Um, Sid Meier's Civilization 7, and a game called, I think it's a Japanese game. I can't even pronounce it. But it wasn't shown on the direct, so this might be a. So,
Okay.
according to Play Asia, anyway, which they can be reliable. Those are the game key games. So to answer your question, pretty much all the first party titles are physical. The game will be on the cartridge. So if you're getting only Nintendo, Donkey Kong, Mario, um, you'll be fine. Like
Yeah.
it'll be on the game cartridge. But
Okay.
again, it's so arbitrary. Like Cyberpunk is on the cartridge, but Elden Ring isn't. A 3DS
Yeah.
game isn't. But you know, it's just at least with the initial lineup we got, I don't see any rhyme or reason. So if I had to blame, if I had to victim blame, not victim blame, if I had to like pin a suspect, it
Mhm.
would more than likely be this is a third party developer choosing to have their games be game keys as opposed to um having it all the cartridge. This is also, I just thought of this. This could also be some type of anti-piracy measure where if it's
Yeah.
on a
Yeah.
game key, the whole game isn't on the cartridge. Because let's not fool ourselves.
Mhm.
More than likely, a Switch 2 emulator will come out a couple months after the Switch 2 releases. And it could be for certain developers, they don't want their games pirated. Well, I'm going to put it on a game key. So if you get your hands on a cartridge, it means nothing because the game isn't on the cartridge. That could
But
also be a possibility.
but then to kind of counter that, Gunner, like I can just get the game in other means because if it's a third party title that's not exclusive to the Switch, there are emulators for currently at this time PS4. So it's like they'll find a way around it. In terms of like piracy if they want to emulate the game, and honestly
No,
speaking,
but
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, but like, let's say they want to do it with, let's say, a brand new Zelda title releases on the Switch 2 at some point.
Mm-hmm.
They might make it a game key because look at what happened with Look what happened with Tears of the Kingdom. That game leaked, I think, like a month before its official release date, and it was running on emulator. People were playing the game a month before its official release date on emulators, on Switch emulator. That's why Nintendo went so hard on things like Yuzu and stuff. Because, you have your game that you've been working on, it's leaked. However, it could be some guy at the warehouse that, gets a copy, flashes it, throws it on the internet, and now your game is out there in full, playable, 100% a month early. So if it's a game key, it may be harder because there is no data on the cartridge. The cartridge is just, as the name implies, a key.
Yeah, I mean that's true. That definitely raises a fair point. I was just thinking because given the correlation of like the current games that we just verified that are not that don't have keys are first party games. So I wonder what the likelihood would be for them to actually incorporate a key for Zelda, because I mean Mario Kart is a big game as well as Metroid, and Donkey Kong seems to be like it's going to be a killer of a game as well. So if they didn't provide keys for that, what would be the likelihood of them doing it for Zelda? I mean, also considering that they had a bad situation with the previous iteration of Zelda, but I'm basically saying that if I were to emulate Switch games, they would be first party Switch games or any games that are inaccessible to the other consoles, right? Because like let's say, for example, Professor Layton, which I think they did announce a title for that on the Switch too. Professor Layton gets an exclusive title on the Switch too. That would be the only reason I would emulate that, because it's only on the Switch. If I'm emulating anything for that's Switch related, it would probably be just the first party stuff and any exclusive titles, and then anything else
Mhm.
that's third party, I'd probably go towards like and I disclaimer guys, I am not promoting emulation under no circumstances am I promoting it. I'm just giving hypotheticals.
No,
Um,
it's a thing that's going to happen. If we're being realistic,
yeah,
like it's going to happen. If they can emulate PS5 games, which I think they can, it's just you need a fucking monster rig to run it well. Like they'll find a way. Like it's a fact of life.
yeah, yeah. But I'm just saying to basically that anything outside the Switch 2's ecosystem, I would most likely, if I want that game, I would most likely go elsewhere for like PS5 or Microsoft, because I think those games will have much better compatibility via emulation than the Switch. Like the Switch games, there's always probably some like, from what I've heard, some type of like conflicting issues or whatever in terms of playability and um, just just being able to run it. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, who's to say it won't happen down the line? It could be Nintendo doesn't want to burn any goodwill right now. So
Hmm.
Mario Kart and Donkey Kong are cart only, but let's say maybe a year, 2 years down the line, the next major Mario release, Zelda release, DK, whatever, maybe it does become um a key only game, because at this point, we've got our player base, we've got our Switch 2 owners, and they're betting that these people are not going to trade in their Switches or sell their Switches, and they're just gonna, well, I want to play the new Zelda game, so okay, I guess I'm getting a key.
That's true. That is true. That yep. The tides are certainly changing. I think if it was maybe 15, possibly, yeah, maybe 15 years ago, they probably would have gotten pushback for it. But now, it's out in the open. I
Yeah,
always
they're just doing what they want to do, and they're I don't know if it's unearned arrogance or whatever the case may be, but they're doing it, and they're not saying anything about it. They're just basically saying, "Yep, this is what it is. We'll see you in June."
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's either arrogance or confidence, which can be two sides of the same coin. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
who knows? But yeah, overall, I think Claire Jackson definitely made some valid points. There are a couple of niche points that she made where it's like
For sure.
it's
Yeah.
a little you can tolerate that. It's a little tolerable. I think you're being a little excessive at poking the console or whatnot. But she definitely hit the nail on the head on quite a few points that would be considerable thoughts for people who are investing in a Switch 2. Um, yeah, the game key thing is a big deal. Um, Hopefully, it's not any of the games that. Well, so far from what you mentioned, it's not any of the titles that I plan to pick up. Um,
No, I think you're safe for now. For now, being
yeah, for
the
now is the
key
operative
word.
word.
Yeah.
For now. But we shall see. We'll see what the future holds. I'm still on the fence of whether or not I'm going to pre-order this day one. I'm not certain. Um, I am a part of the people who are listed um, for being able to pre-order because they're trying to stop the scalpers, which is a phenomenal thing that they implemented. I hope other companies
Yeah.
do that as well. Um, that's the thing. Like Nintendo does a lot of small things that makes me think like even though they are a corporation and most corporations aren't for us, I think they have a little like kind of like a in Zelda where you get a piece of heart before you make a whole heart. I think
That that
them
are
as a
just better at
company.
hiding their which I don't know, depending on who you ask, they kind of let the mask slip with this one, but
That's true. That is true. But they I gotta give it to them. They've been given full transparency. It wasn't a day one situation where you was at a GameStop and you was like, oh, it's just a code or whatnot. Um, and they also, which I'm going to provide in the description for you guys to review, they did provide a list of compatibility issues with certain games as well. I wanted to touch base on that, but we are pressed for time. So we're gonna post those in the description so you guys can review and take a look at and whatnot. So I gotta give it to them to some degree. They are definitely giving I can't say full transparency, but they're giving enough transparency where a lot of consumers would have probably said that they shot themselves in the foot. Um, but yeah, they're pretty bold for doing it, and I respect it. And it's not something I agree with, especially the key aspect of it. But we shall see. We shall see if this is going to be
definitely.
a,
Yeah.
a make or break for their sales. Yep. Yeah. So we're pretty much approaching on time. Do you have any last comments, Gunna?
Uh no, not really, other than, the information's out there, you make your own decision. What's worthless to another man is valuable to another. I
Mm-hmm.
think overall the Switch 2 seems like a solid console. It's a solid upgrade from the original Switch. It's no PS5 Pro. It's no high-end PC.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who weren't interested in Switch are not going to be interested in Switch 2, but I don't doubt there's going to be some solid first-party experiences and maybe some solid exclusive third-party experiences. So, you know, if that's for you, hey, as long as you're up to date and you know what you're getting yourself into, enjoy the Switch 2. I'm sure you're gonna have fun with it. So,
Yeah, I agree. I certainly don't doubt that. Again, it just sucks with certain practices that they're partaking in. Um, but this is the unfortunately this is the current world that we live in. Um, Hopefully, it comes a time where these companies are pushing to a point where people are like, that's a little too much. Because there's been instances in companies where it's like, we're gonna push the envelope, see how far you go, and then it's like, oh,
yep,
yeah, we're backing off. It's like, oh my god, we lost a significant amount of money, so we're gonna kind of go back and roll back the wheel, so to speak. So we shall see. We shall definitely see. Um, But yeah, this is pretty much our time. I want to take this time to thank Gunnar for the wonderful conversation.
You're
Um,
very welcome.
yeah, thank you, thank you. Huge shout out to Claire Jackson for this very informative and opinionated article. Again, she raised a lot of points. If you want to check it out, it will be in the description of our of this current topic. Also, we're going to provide the compatibility issues and the launchable compatibility issues that Nintendo has posted on their sites in a PDF format. We will provide that to you guys for easy accessibility. Um, also, if you've listened to the conversation this far, if you enjoyed what we spoke about, subscribe to the channel. We release a topic every Wednesday at 12 p.m. EST. Um, so we kind of speak on many different topics pertaining to like the gaming sphere, and it kind of tends to extend to other things as well. It could be anime, pretty much anything nerd culture related. We pretty much cover. Um, we also have a main channel where I run. I do reviews on games. I do unboxing videos. I also do a couple of shorts, and I also stream as well on Twitch. It's titled Logical Gamers TV. If you want to check that out. And as you guys see listed at the bottom of our screen where the article is being listed, we have all the socials available to you. Um, those socials will also be listed in the description as well. So feel free to peruse whichever one you want to. If you want to interact with any of us live, definitely follow the Discord. That's going to be provided as well. And yeah, that is pretty much it. So with that being said, folks, you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And last but certainly not least, if it ain't gaming, it ain't logical, folks. Peace.
Till next time.